Hey, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady, and in this video I'm reviewing a Mercedes AMG GT53 four-door coupe. So listen up, the four-door coupe was first seen in 1962 with a car named the Rover P5, but was really brought to life by Mercedes when they created the CLS. And now they've taken it to another level with this, the AMG four-door coupe. And to top it all off, the 2022 model year got a mild refresh. So let's see what this thing is all about in this review of the Mercedes AMG GT53. Alright y'all, so before getting started with the review, a big thank you to Keys Mercedes for allowing me to review this GT53 today. If you happen to be interested in any new or pre-owned Mercedes-Benz or any other product, they actually have a pretty cool pre-owned inventory of non-Mercedes cars. Give them a call. I've left their information in the description below. But now, this GT53. So now the exterior of this AMG GT four-door. I think it looks really cool and sports a unique look to it. The front end has this aggressive in-your-face presence with the Pan America grille and a power bulging hood. And of course you have the fastback style roofline, which is the hallmark of this design, and the GT coupe inspired taillights. They almost look identical to the one you see in the coupe version. So this thing has a way of looking like a sports car, but in this four-door sedan style body. So speaking of the body, when you see this thing in person, it looks rather large for a sporty oriented car. But in fact, it's actually 5 inches shorter in length than the Mercedes CLS, which it is commonly compared to, of course, because of the fastback style roof. And in fact, it's 8 inches shorter than a Mercedes S-Class, so quite a drastic difference in length when you look at it as a big four-door car. And one thing that there's a common misperception about this car is it's a stretched AMG GT, the coupe version. And in reality, it's not. It's actually based off of the E-Class platform, and it has some of that magic dust or styling design sprinkled in from the CLS. Alright, so this being an AMG, let's of course talk about the engine. And there's some callback to some old Mercedes stuff here, and that's because this has a inline 6-cylinder engine with a 3-liter displacement, and it has a 48-volt EQ mild hybrid system with a combined output of 429 horsepower and 384 pounds-feet of torque. It's mated to a 9-speed traditional torque converter automatic transmission, and it's putting power down to all 4 wheels. Now that mild hybrid system, the 48-volt somewhat battery, supplies 21 horsepower and 184 pounds-feet of torque to that combined output I just mentioned. So this engine is basically some old heritage when you bring back the inline 6-cylinder and then some new technology with this 48-volt battery. And of course, it puts power down to all 4 wheels. And what does this all equate to? A 0 to 60 time of 4.4 seconds. And of course, many of you know that there is also a 63 version of the AMG 4-door coupe, and that has some differences, of course, being that the 63 has a V8 with a 630 horsepower engine. And two interesting other things. Number one, the 63 actually weighs less than the 53, which is quite strange because that has a V8, this has an inline 6-cylinder, and the extra weight in this is contributed to by all that mild hybrid battery technology that they've tried to modernize this with. And in addition to that, another interesting item is that the 63 actually has a double clutch transmission, while this has a 9-speed regular torque converter. Now, putting aside the 53 and 63, the 53 actually has a AMG Sport exhaust. So let's go around back and take a listen. All right, so full disclosure, the GT53 does have a rev limiter when you're in park and even when you're in neutral, not allowing you to rev it beyond about 3.5 or 4,000 RPM, but I promise you'll get a better dose of what this thing sounds like during the driving portion of the review. So now the rear end, there's a couple things I want to talk about here, starting off with the taillights. These look really nice, and like I said at the beginning of the video, they are pretty much identical to what you see, or closely resemble what you see in the two-door version of this car, the GT Coupe. And beyond that, there is this extended wing you can see here. So this is an electronic operated wing, and it actually has 3 different modes. So first mode, when you are traveling between 0 and 50 miles an hour, it just lays down flush with the rest of the body. 50 to 87 miles an hour, it goes up 2.5 degrees. Above 87 miles an hour, you get 5.1 degrees of angle with this wing. Now, this can also be manually operated via a button on the interior, and it'll basically look like this if you do it that way. But know that this thing does have basically active aerodynamics with this rear wing spoiler. Now, the other thing, and more interestingly, and probably more of a bonus item to attract buyers towards this car beyond it just being sporty, is the fastback roof, which gives you a tailgate. So this is somewhat of a pass-through style trunk. Now, one thing about the trunk is it does not have a convenience access method. So you do have to take the key out of your pocket. There's a button on there. There's also a button on the interior, but there isn't anything typically what you see above here, the license plate, where you push a button and it opens. So you do have to take the key out of your pocket. And that's actually quite unfortunate because it is something that you expect in cars nowadays. But anyway, when you push this button, this thing will open for you electronically. And as I said, you do have a pass-through style trunk, and there is a lot of space back here. You can easily fit 2 larger pieces of luggage in here and possibly a third medium size, or probably 2 duffel bags. So I do not anticipate any issues as far as carrying stuff in your GT53. So if you wanted to use this thing on a day-to-day basis, no problems. If you want to take it on a getaway, weekend getaway, no issues whatsoever. As far as closing the trunk, it is electronic closing as well. There's 2 buttons. One here on the left closes it, and the one on the right, you push that. Not only does it close, but it also locks your doors for you. So now that we've gone over the rear end, let me take you around to the side and show you what these really cool looking wheels look like. So now let's talk about the wheels, tires, brakes, and suspension. And starting off with that suspension, this does have the AMG ride control and the adaptive shocks. So you do have the ability to adjust your ride comfort or the ride settings based off of your driving conditions. Now, these wheels, these are the optional 20-inch wheels. They're 20 inches on all 4 corners, and they have a really classic looking design, a silver grayish finish. But one place where the GT is actually very strong are options of your wheels. You've got 6 different wheels that you can pick from, these being one of them. But my personal favorite are these. They're a 10-spoke design. They actually look really, really cool. Now, the tires, these are wrapped with Michelin Pilot 4S tires, 265 up front, 295 in the rear, so you do get big meaty tires as well. Inside the wheelbarrow, Mercedes has you covered. 14.5-inch brakes with 6 piston calipers up front, 14.5-inch brakes as well in the rear. So now that we've got the wheels, tires, and brakes covered, let's jump onto the inside and let me show you what it's like in there. All right, so now the interior of the AMG GT53 4-door coupe, starting off with the seat. So this is the base seat. You do have the ability to get the optional AMG performance seat, which is a little bit more aggressive. I've sat in that seat in the 2-door AMG GT Coupe, and it is still comfortable, but this is more comfortable and more suited on a day-to-day basis. So this does have all the normal adjustments. It does not have adjustable bolsters, so they are fixed. They are still aggressive. They hold you in place, but just know that you do not have the ability to make them more hugging, for the lack of a better term. They are heated seat as well, and just overall they're pretty comfortable. Now, the other highlight of the AMG GT interior is the steering wheel, and there's a lot of stuff about this thing, so let me jump into a little bit more of the details. And first things first, I want to say that I like it a lot. It's actually really cool as far as functionality. They've put in some thought into this, and the look of it is very cool as well. So the look of it, it is all leather, which is always a bonus. No Alcantara, so it will last. The thickness of it is perfect. It's a nice meaty wheel, and I prefer that actually. And the paddle shifters, they got this really cool look to them, and they're cut like a die cut, and they just look different than any other paddle shifter I've seen in an AMG product. So it's really nice. Now, as far as the rest of the design, you do have these multi-spoke columns here in the center of the wheel. And this is the part about the thought process, the convenience or the intuitiveness of this wheel. So let's separate it into two sections. The things on the right-hand side, there's shortcut keys here that operate the infotainment system. So it's really cognitive, and it makes a lot of sense here. They put everything that's on the right-hand side close to the infotainment controlled on the right-hand side of the wheel. Anything on the left-hand side of the wheel controls your gauges, things that you want to operate inside here, your speed settings, your cruise control, all that stuff. So it's really nicely laid out as far as the wheel goes. Now, the other thing I really like about this wheel are these dials. And there's two things about them that I really like. Number one, they look really cool. And the one here on the right allows you to toggle through your drive mode settings and all those other cool things related to the dynamics of the car. But and then the one on the left here is configurable, and this is the second point. There's a lot of thought gone on into this button as well. So you do have two options here, but those options are configurable, so you can toggle through what you want to change. It gives you the ability to raise your spoiler, to turn on your 360 camera, to adjust your AMG drive mode settings. So you do have the ability to configure it even though you see two buttons at a time. So this is that conveniency and intuitive, thoughtful process that has gone into this steering wheel, and a major thumbs up to Mercedes for putting that effort into designing this wheel. Now, coming over into the infotainment, this is the MBUX system, which I like a lot. It is very, very intuitive, very, very easy to use. This does have a touchscreen. The touchscreen is very crisp, very clear, easy to read, and it does have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Now, one thing that I really appreciate about this AMG 53 that I didn't see in other Mercedes brand or Mercedes products is this little shortcut menu here, and it allows you to toggle through a lot of the settings for this car. So you do, at the click of a button, just go into your 360 camera, and this thing does have a great camera, the telephone, then your car settings, and then you even have the ability to set your favorites. So this is a really nicely laid out thing. Now, one of the things I am going to ding about this interior is this little metal brush piece. I feel like it doesn't flow nicely with the rest of this interior. I did see that this is available in carbon fiber, and me personally, I would spec that option because I kind of feel like it doesn't jive well with these buttons, these LCD capacitive buttons here. So that's one thing I would change about it, or at least option into it. But beyond that, speaking of those capacitive buttons, these are really cool. They're basically screens acting as buttons, but the nice thing about them is they're not just hard touch screens. They actually give you haptic feedback when you initiate or use them. So you have the ability to toggle through your drive modes, raise and lower your spoiler, and then you've got these really cool metal looking toggle switches to toggle through your drive modes and also raise and lower the volume. So as an overview of the front seat, and I'll take you to the back seat here in a second, it's a really nicely designed place. And like I said, beyond just the exceptional level of quality that you get in Mercedes cars, I was very surprised and impressed by the fact that Mercedes has put in a lot of thought process into the conveniency and into the ergonomics of the interior, for at least for the front end of this GT53. So now let's go to the back and I'll show you what it's like over there. All right, so now the back seat of the 4-door coupe. And one thing that I think I personally had as far as concerns or interest about this car being a fastback style roof is how much space I've got back here. Do I fit back here? And I'm 5'10", I'm sitting comfortably behind myself, and I can say that I have plenty of legroom, and my head actually surprisingly is not touching the roof. I don't feel claustrophobic in here. The roof line is cut short, so I do see that in my peripheral vision here that I do have a sloping roof, but it's not making me feel like I'm needing for space. All right, so now that we've got the space out of the way, let me talk about these seats. So you do have bucket seats in here. It is a max occupancy of 4 people. You have a bucket seat here, a center section, and another bucket seat. There is no middle area here that you can sit in. But for the first time in the AMG GT's product life cycle, Mercedes is giving you the option for a bench style seat in here. So you can option in a 5 occupant seating configuration in this GT for the first time in 2022. So that's always an added bonus for anybody who wanted to have an additional seat back here. But as far as the seat goes, it's as comfortable as what you get in the front. I have no complaints about it. As I said, I do have a bunch of legroom and headroom, so no complaints about the seating position or any of the seating comforts back here. As far as the center section goes, you do have 2 cup holders, and you do have an extra space here to put your stuff and 2 USB ports. You also have an additional USB port down here underneath the climate control vents. Now, one thing to keep in mind for this 2-seater configuration is you do not have an armrest back here. So just something to keep in mind. So that's basically the interior. The front is really nice. The design of it is really nice. It does feel very cocooned and secluded in here. And the luxury and the quality is, of course, on par with what you would expect from a Mercedes. Now, let's go to the driving portion of the review and see what this thing drives like. All right, so now the driving portion of the AMG GT53 review. And as always, the visibility out front is fantastic, actually. The seating position is really good in this car. Out the side, no issues. The glass, the pillars back here are pretty narrow, and I do have the 360-degree camera, the parking sensors, all that stuff. And this does have the driver assistance package. So I do have a lot of safety baked in and also added on top. Base price for the 53 GT is $102,000. This one aspect is $107,000. So it's not a cheap car. Of course, it's an AMG. It's not going to be cheap, but it does give you that middle of the road between this and the 63, which I believe is like, I want to say $40,000 more. Compared specs, and it just this gives it a lot more value if compared to the price difference. So now let's go ahead and turn this thing on and go for a drive. The exhaust at startup isn't the best, but as I'll display here in a second, that inline 6-cylinder is pretty nice sounding. So I'm going to go ahead and start off in Sport Plus mode. And mind you, this is a dealer car. It's brand new. I'm not going to hammer it, being respectful to the dealer and also to the owners who will eventually buy this car. So let's pull out. And of course, as I was saying, the seat is very, very comfortable. And the visibility out front is very good as well. The steering feel is good in the Sport Plus mode. It does get very weighted, but not artificial. It still feels somewhat natural, and the progression between Comfort, Sport, and Sport Plus is good as far as the steering feel. All right, so now let's get going with the straight stretch. Let's give it some gas. When the inline 6-cylinder wakes up, when you give it some gas, it does sound very, very good. That's the truth with most inline 6-cylinders that I've driven. It may not sound as loud and as in your face as a 8-cylinder, but the straight 6, especially in these European specs, nothing against the American spec, but in these Mercedes and Audi and BMW, especially BMW inline 6-cylinders, they're really, really good. And on the upshift, you do get that pop. It's a really nice sounding exhaust. And while I come to a stop, the brakes have a really good feel to them. A lot of bite at the top of the pedal. It doesn't feel extremely sporty, like it doesn't feel like a sports car's brake. It does give you a little bit more aggression, but let's see, off the line. Yes, it definitely sounds very, very good. And the speed, it's not the fastest, but it does give you a good sensation of speed. It doesn't really like take your breath away as far as the acceleration goes, but you definitely feel like you're moving in a fast car. So now I'm going to go ahead and put it in Comfort and detail out the rest of this thing. So in Comfort, everything obviously lightens up, but how much does it really lighten up? Because this is, after all, an AMG car, and should you expect that this car is going to be a soft, luxurious, comfortable ride? I think it will be a pretty luxurious ride. It does, I would say it's more on the side of cushiness and luxury versus sport, as you would expect in the AMG line car. It is rather stiff when you put it in Comfort, in Sport and Sport Plus. It does stiffen up, but not to a point where it's just absolutely jarring and you're like, am I driving a Mercedes or am I driving a Lamborghini or something? Now, the one thing I do feel about the feel or the steering and the suspension of this car is the steering feel is very weighted. Even in Comfort mode, you do have this nice weight. So if you're somebody who's looking for a weighted feel in your steering, you're gonna get it in this GT53. Overall, what do I think of this car? I think this is a great car, actually. Even with that shortcoming of the speed at $107,000, the luxury in here is very good. The speed is decent. It's definitely not slow. And the other thing that impressed me a lot, and I talked about it during the interior portion, is the thoughtfulness of this interior, the way it's laid out, the way everything is thought out in the convenience seat department. It's just the buttons, the steering wheel, everything is nicely placed, and I just like the interior of this GT53 a lot. But that's pretty much all I've got to say about this car. If you have any other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below or send me a message on Instagram at DriveSteady. But otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.